And before we actually start, let's take a moment and cultivate our motivation. And think that we will listen and share together this evening so we can learn about how our own mind works, so that we can learn how to open our hearts with genuine compassion to all living beings. And in doing so, to make a positive contribution to society and to progress along the path to full awakening as well. So take a moment and really make that your motivation for being here, so that we're all here for the same reason. Okay, so we're talking about cultivating compassion in the midst of chaos, and how that comes out as social engagement when one's a Buddhist. So definitely this is a time of chaos. I don't know if it's any more chaotic than any other time in human history, basically because samsara, the cycle of rebirth itself, is chaotic. Yeah. I think our minds are probably just as crazy as people's minds were centuries ago, but we have more technology to be crazy with. And so we can do more damage, than before. So we get a lot of requests at the Abbey, especially after the 2016 election. People calling us and writing us and saying, what is happening to this country? How are we going to endure this? People saying, I feel so discouraged, so overwhelmed by despair. And, how do we keep our head above water? So I don't know if anybody here had those feelings. Maybe I'm talking to a big Trump audience. Uh-oh. Then I'm in big trouble. Get your tomatoes ready. Yeah. But it isn't just him, he's just indicative of the karma that we have created, all together as a country, as a world, to go through this. And what's coming up now is a lot of themes that have been present throughout American history, that we maybe ignored or thought we had overcome, and only to find that they are resurging now. I just finished reading a book on the second coming of the KKK. Fascinating book. And the author made a comment that since the first settlers arrived in America, there's been the idea of white supremacy in the country. I thought, yeah, it's not just now. Yeah, this has kind of been part of American culture for a very long time. I think the anger that we see in society, too, has been part of our culture for a long time. We just don't see it that way. I started seeing the Boston Tea Party in a whole new way. It was a terrorist act. Wasn't it? Wasn't that terrorism? Yeah, we call it patriotism. But from the British point of view, it wasn't. It was probably terrorism. I taught in Israel some years ago, and they took me to one of the former British prisons, which is now a museum. And they had pictures of some of the Israeli patriots who, did all sorts of things to get the British out of Palestine and make it into a Jewish state. And I was reading the stories of all these patriots, and I turned to my friend and I said, they're terrorists. And my Israeli friends went, no, they're patriots. But they were Buddhist enough to say, yeah, you're right. But, when you look at it, there's just many of these kinds of themes that keep reappearing in human history that are traced back, no matter what culture we're in, to ignorance, anger, and clinging attachment. So that's the universal problem, the human mind that is overwhelmed with afflictions. That's what our real problem is. And it keeps coming out in all these different ways, in racism, in nativism, in, the Me Too movement against sexual harassment, colonialism, everything we look at in human history is kind of marinated in the soup of ignorance, anger, and attachment. And the thing is, it's not other people's ignorance, anger, and attachment. It's our own. Yeah. So, one thing we like to do as human beings is when there's a problem to point the finger at other people who are the source of the problem. Those people who are bigoted. Those people who take advantage of others. Those people, who do this and that. And yet, and so we think they're really bad, but we're kind of somehow beyond that. Yeah. We don't have prejudice or bias or anything. Yeah. But when we look closely, our minds are not always so different from other people's minds. We may not be doing the same actions as they are. Yeah. But having the same afflictions in the mind, we're very similar. Some of you may remember the Rodney King incident in Los Angeles some years ago, and with this wild chase on the freeway, and people beat King, and then there were riots in the city, and everybody was pointing a finger at everybody else. And when I sat and thought about it, I thought, if I were raised like Rodney King, I probably would have been behaving like he did, even though I disagree with what he did. If I had been raised like the police officers, I probably would have behaved like them, even though I also didn't agree with what they did. If I had been raised like the people who rioted, I probably would have rioted too. Yeah. In other words, if we really look at our minds, that the same mental afflictions are there. It's just how they come out depends on the circumstance that we live in and what we encounter in our lives. So that exercise actually made me quite humble. I realized that I couldn't point the finger at other people who were, doing horrible things, because I could have been them too. Yeah. And so it is the same now, to look around. I mean, I would really like to think that I wouldn't be like the alt-right. It's like, I don't want to be like them. But if I had grown up like them, who knows? Who knows? And so my point here is, in looking at the chaos, to see that it's not other people's problem, that we all share the same mental afflictions. And if we want to change the situation, we have to change our own minds. Yeah, it would be really wonderful to think that if we only changed laws, that some of the behavior that we don't like would disappear. Laws help, but the real problem is in the mind, and we can't legislate peace. Yeah, it's impossible. The only way to create peace in a chaotic world is by changing our own minds. So that's something that we're all responsible to do, and that only we can do. So you can hire people to cut your grass. You can hire people to clean your house. You can hire people to drive you places. But we can't hire people to sleep for us so that we'll feel more rested, or to eat for us so that we don't have to spend so much time eating. And we can't hire people to do Dharma practice for us so that our own minds will be transformed. This is something that's our responsibility, that only we can do. So actually, this whole emphasis on personal responsibility is something that really drew me to Buddhism when I first encountered it. Yeah, because when we're responsible, that means we can do something to change the situation. If what is happening is God's will, then there's nothing we can do. Yeah. But if things are a result of our own afflictions, our own karma, our own virtuous mental factors, our own wholesome deeds, yeah, then we have some power to change the situation. Mm-hmm. And I really think the Buddha, the way he spoke, presented a wonderful way to do that. Mm-hmm. Because when we look in our own mind, we see that, all of our problems really rest on a completely chaotic, talk about chaos. Ignorance is the ultimate chaos. And all of our mental afflictions, rest on this innate ignorance that misapprehends how we exist, how the world exists, and instead creates fantasized ways of existing that we believe in and that we follow. Okay? And that we can dismantle. That's good news. So how does this relate to social engagement? Yeah, because people ask this question a lot, because in many ways, Buddhism is saying, we got to work on ourselves. And we have these images of people going off and living in the mountains and meditating all the time. But how does this relate to social engagement? So one of my teachers kept reminding us that no matter where you go, you always live in relationship to every single living being. Even you go off, you're in some isolated cave in the Himalayas, you live in relationship to every living being. There's no way not to live in relationship to every living being. The relationship may change, and it will change, but we're always in relationship with other living beings. So that in itself is social engagement. Okay? We sometimes think, oh, social engagement, you go and you organize a soup kitchen and you do legal aid for people in poverty. How many of you went to the March for Our Lives? Good. A few of us. What happened to the rest of you? What are you doing on Saturday? Playing with your guns? Yeah? So I think that was something very important if we care about sentient beings. But everything we do, if our mind is a mind of compassion and care, becomes social engagement because we are working to improve the state of our mind and at the same time improve the society we live in, and at the same time create karma so that in our future lives we can meet the Dharma and continue to progress along the path. So what I'm getting at is all these things are not separate. Yeah. Doing our own Dharma practice, meditating, working on our mind, is not an isolated activity very much different from going to a protest march, or very much different from having a soup kitchen, or very much different from being a Dharma teacher, or very much different from teaching in the inner city, or for that matter, very much different from teaching one of the affluenza kids. Yeah, because everybody has some suffering. Everybody has some suffering. And we all have different talents. We have different karma with different people. And so there's going to be many, many different ways in which we can engage in the world and be socially active and actively work for the benefit of others, and at the same time be quite aware of the functioning of our own mind and keeping ourselves balanced. Okay? Because I think we tend to go to two extremes. Yeah. So there's one extreme of, I'm going to be Mother Teresa and save the world and do all these projects and open this and that and the other and, completely do everything for everybody. And then we try and do that for a number of years, and then we're completely exhausted, physically and mentally. That's one extreme. The other extreme is, doing all of that is a waste of time. I'm going to meditate and attain nirvana. And so we go live in some secluded place. There's the Tibetans have many good stories about meditators. And some of these meditators are amazing. They really have high realizations. But they also have a few interesting stories they tell. So there was one meditator, who had such strong samadhi, he would go into meditation for like a week or a month and then surface again. And so he was meditating quite a bit, and at one point, he came out of his meditation for a while. I guess he had to go get supplies. And his beard had grown quite long, and some mice had made a nest in his beard. He got so mad at those mice. You know, he stood up and he just shook his beard and chased the mice away, and probably traumatized those poor mice. But the idea is, here's this guy who can sit in his own blissful samadhi, but a few little mice can make him go berserky and totally lose his inner calm and inner peace. Something's wrong. Okay? So I think, some people may go to one extreme or the other and survive and keep their minds balanced. I think most of us need some kind of combination. Because if we're going to work in socially active ways, we need to know how to keep our own mind calm, our own mind stable. Because if it isn't, then we may be thinking we're doing things beneficial for others that aren't necessarily beneficial because our motivation has gotten corrupt. Yeah. So when people speak about compassion burnout, I have one friend, and she told me, I don't know if you speak about compassion burnout, did you really have actual compassion to start with? Which I think is a very interesting question, because actual compassion is quite difficult. It's, yes, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, we all have a compassionate nature, and we have that ability to be compassionate. But to maintain compassion over a long period of time in a stable way is not so easy, because our mental afflictions, our klesa, come in and stir up the soup. So we start out saying, I'm doing this to benefit others. But then, when other people don't like what we're doing to benefit them, we get upset. Yeah, have you had that happen? Maybe even on a small scale with a family member or a friend, and you could see they were going down the slippery slope, and you went to help them, and they said, get out of here. You had that experience? Just 2 people, 3, 4. I think many of us have had that experience. Okay? And then we feel shattered. It's like, but I'm trying to help. And this person just, they won't listen to me. Well, are we actually being compassionate, or are we trying to mold people to be what we want them to be? Do you get what I'm saying? That a lot of the times when we think we're giving good advice and helping people, we're actually trying to I'm going to make you into what I think you should be, which is not actually so compassionate. Yeah. And in fact, sometimes it's pretty arrogant on our part. Yeah, I have the answers for your life. If you only do what I say, everything will go well. And the reason you have problems is because you're not following my advice. But I'm so compassionate, and I want you to have a better life. So do you see what's going on? On one hand, there's a sincere wish for somebody to have a better life. But also the motivation gets corrupted, and what comes in is, I want to control you without looking like I'm controlling you. Yeah. And then we get exhausted, we become bitter, we get discouraged, and we throw up our hands and then say, well, I have compassion burnout. But I think to really be compassionate over a long period of time, and I'm not saying you have to have this all together before you practice compassion. No, this is how we build up compassion. Yeah, is by doing it and falling on our face and picking ourselves up again and falling down again. That's how you build it. But, to really see, to have a firm understanding when we're trying to benefit others, that problems are not going to go away quickly. Yeah. We think that they should be able to go away quickly. Yeah. And if we just do this and this and this, then those problems are going to be gone. But it's not like that. First of all, because changing the mind is not so easy. We know from our own experience, changing our own bad habits, is that easy or difficult? Yeah, it's not so easy, is it? To stop being self-centered? That's not so easy. So in the same way for other people, yeah, the changes that they have to make, it's not going to be something that happens easily and quickly. It's something that gets worked at over a period of time. And so if we're really going to benefit sentient beings, we have to have the ability to be there over an extended period of time. And by be there, I don't mean hovering over them. I mean in our mind to be present so that when they need help, they feel free to come to us. Because it sure would be nice if everybody would just listen to our advice and follow it, wouldn't it? Yeah? But these sentient beings sometimes are so dumb. We have this wonderful advice and they just don't follow it. But when they give us their wonderful advice, what do we say? Yeah. Get off my back. Mind your own business. Get lost. And that's when we're being polite. Okay? So when I look at, compassion in the midst of chaos and socially engaged work, it makes me think of the bodhisattvas, the great bodhisattvas who have that amazing intention to become fully awakened Buddhas, so that from their side they don't face any hindrances to benefiting other beings. So they don't face hindrances from their side. There's plenty of hindrances from the side of the beings they want to benefit. But I think of those bodhisattvas, and I think of how they've been trying to lead me to awakening since beginningless time. Yeah. So the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have been around a long time, and they've been trying to benefit the rest of us. And I don't know about you, and I can't remember my previous lives, but I can tell by what's going on in this life what I must have done in a previous life. And I must have said, when the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas were trying to teach me the Dharma and get me to practice virtue, I probably said, I want to go to the beach. I'm busy. I'm out with my boyfriend. I'll come learn Dharma later. Yeah. Or I've said, what is this Dharma stuff? It's so crazy. You sound like a bunch of ascetics. Yeah. I probably said every nasty thing to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that anyone could ever imagine. And yet, they haven't given up on me. Yeah. So trying to help somebody from a period of time that is beginningless and not giving up on them, that takes a special kind of courage, doesn't it? A special kind of mental stability, a special kind of really big mind that sees that, yes, the causes of suffering can be eliminated, and it's going to take a while. So they don't run away. They don't get compassion fatigue. They don't throw up their hands and say, oh, these sentient beings are too much. Yeah. Do you have people you ever throw up your hands with? You know, you're trying to teach them, you're trying to do something, and they're fighting you the whole way. And you just want, any of you taught school in the public school system? Oh, then you don't know what I'm talking about. Try being a public school teacher. Yeah. And helping however many kids in your overcrowded classroom that doesn't have enough supplies, that doesn't have enough after-school activities for the kids, and the kids come from broken families, and you're trying to help them, and the kids are fighting you, parents are fighting you, the school system is fighting you, the Congress and the state legislators are fighting you. Yeah. And sometimes you feel like, because I taught school before I became a nun, sometimes you feel like this is just hopeless. Just, forget it. Screw the whole thing. Yeah? But then you think, but if I walk out and everybody else who has even a little bit of a good heart walks out, what's going to happen to these kids? Yeah. We can't do that. We can't do that. Yeah. So it's that, when I think of the Bodhisattvas, that quality of just amazing, strong compassion, wanting others to be happy and free of suffering, even more than they want their own selves to be happy and free of suffering. Yeah, they want that. And yet, we're in a world full of obstacles, and they don't give up. They don't abandon us. So when I think of that, then that gives me a lot of courage. If they don't give up on me, who am I to give up on anybody else? I can't. Now, some situations I may not be able to do anything much about right now, actively, but I can keep my mind engaged with those people by doing what in the Tibetan tradition we call the taking and giving, or Tonglen meditation, where we imagine taking the suffering of others, giving them our happiness. So one meditation that if you can't do anything directly to benefit others, at least mentally you don't disconnect from them. Okay? And then discovering all the big or small ways to be of benefit. Yeah? Because, we, like Americans, we think big. I realize not all of you are Americans, but you're here right now, so. We all think, if you're here, you got to think big. So I've got to be, I've got to be the Dalai Lama and Mother Teresa and Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King rolled into one. Okay? Yeah, we kind of put that on our heads. If I'm going to really be beneficial, then I've got to do like that. I remember when I was, how old was I? Oh, yeah, I was like 37 when I turned 37. That was a few eons ago. And I thought, wow, I'm 37. What have I done with my life? Martin Luther King at age 37, my goodness, he was having such an amazing impact on people. And me, what have I done? Yeah, nothing like that. And then I thought, well, I've been trying to practice the Dharma. That's a contribution. Yeah, it's better than if I didn't practice the Dharma. Because if you think I'm bad now, you should have known what I was like before. Yeah. So if I've practiced, then that's good for the world, creating less harm than I used to. Hopefully. Yeah. But we don't need to be Martin Luther King and Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama because they aren't in our families. They aren't in your university, in your workplace. Okay? We are. So who's going to influence the people that we encounter every day? Yeah. Those famous people can have a strong influence on people. But the influence in some ways is abstract because we don't know them. But the people we encounter every day know us. And if we can help in some small way to get them thinking about the Dharma and to improve the quality of their life and their way of thinking, then I think that's social activism. Yeah, because you influence one person in a positive way, they influence two, and they influence four, and then there you go. Okay? And we're the ones who encounter the people in our lives directly. And what we do makes a difference. What we think influences the people around us. What we say and write influences them. What we do also influences them. Yeah. So if we can create a good motivation and do even small things, that can be powerful. I had a friend who, when she was, I think, early 20s, you know how you are, late teens, early 20s, kind of confused. So she was confused, a little bit suicidal. And she was walking down the street one day. This was in Missoula, Montana. And somebody she didn't know from across the street smiled at her and kept walking. But they made eye contact, and he smiled at her. And she told me that had a really profound impact on her at that time when she was so discouraged and depressed. Yeah. Wow, one person made eye contact and smiled at me. Yeah. There's hope, there's human warmth, there's connectivity. And she said that one small action, which took what, maybe 10 seconds, helped her so much. So we don't really know the impact of our actions on other people. And this could be our non-virtuous actions as well as our virtuous ones. Yeah? But to be aware of, if we can keep our mind in a good space, then the way we influence other people is going to be very helpful. If we let anger, especially anger, and greed, run wild in our mind, not to mention arrogance and jealousy, then our actions are going to be quite harmful in big scales and small scales. So this is our own personal responsibility, to look at our own minds and change our minds. And this is what I think is so beautiful about Buddhism, is the Buddha didn't just say, don't be so selfish. Because we've heard that since we were kids. Every religion says, don't be so selfish. How do you stop being selfish? That's the question. Yeah, we all agree that being selfish and self-centered isn't very good. But how do we stop it? We can't just sit there and will ourselves because we can't control our mind so well. So this is where spiritual practice comes in. And I think where the Buddha's teachings can be very helpful. And you don't have to be a Buddhist to benefit from the Buddha's teachings, because so many of the teachings have nothing to do with religion. They're basically common sense. Really. Yeah. So the methods, the Buddha said, meditate like this, contemplate this, think like this, spend some time really investigating this. And your mind, your thought is going to change if you do that. And so he taught, these specific meditations to overcome specific mental defilements. And they're fantastic. If we practice them, they work. Yeah. But we have to practice them. That's the thing. We have to practice. We can't just buy Buddhist books, put them on the bookshelf, have a nice altar. Every morning we go past the altar, Namo Amitofo, but then we don't practice. No, we have to really, it's a process of retraining our mind. And it takes energy and it takes work, and it's beautiful when you do it. It is hard, but when you see yourself change, and especially when the people who know you very well comment that you've changed, then, yeah, it's very heartening. Because you can begin to see that we have inner human beauty and we have something to give and to share with others.
Hi. I was wondering if you could comment on something that's, I think it's quite common enough to almost be a cliche in social justice, which is the phenomenon of people becoming like a solidification of the self and of identity, and can even get into kind of self-righteousness and looking down on other people, and how we can avoid that. Thank you.
Very good question. Yes, part of our human problem is that we create a lot of identities, and we think that we are those identities. And it's very easy. Some of us, we all, especially in this country, we have a lot of negative identities. Yeah, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. Other people are better than me. You know that one. You people are high achievers, so you know what it's like to not be happy with yourself. It's true, isn't it? Yeah? I'm going off, I'll answer your question. At the Abbey, we have a little thing where I live. We called it High Achievers Neurotic Association. Yeah? Because people think, oh, high achievers, they have everything together, they're so successful. Come on. Yeah? We're a mess. Because when you high achieve, your problem is you're so anxious, how do I do it again the next time? Yeah? So anyway, that's a whole other discourse. Okay, but we develop all these identities. And so one of our identities, especially when we're, we feel inspired to change the world. And then an identity becomes, I'm the one who's working for social justice, and I want to really, see equality in this country and get rid of bigotry. And I'm doing everything I can and organizing everything I can. And I'm really fantastic, and I wish all these other people appreciated what I was doing. And they don't. Yeah, those idiots. Yeah. So me, who is promoting the opposite of bigotry, is now calling a bunch of other people a bunch of idiots. Okay? I protested during the Vietnam War era. So I remember this one protest at UCLA, and we were kind of lined up here, and the cops were lined up there. And the person next to me picked up a brick or a rock and threw it. And I went, no. No, no, no. That's not what this is about. But that's what happens when you get self-righteous, is your mind becomes very much like the mind of the people you are protesting against. So those people are angry and starting wars, and I am angry at them. And anger is anger, isn't it? Okay. Those people are so arrogant in DC. Yeah. But I'm not arrogant like they are. I'm much better than them. So this is the real challenge of always monitoring our mind and always checking our motivation. And the Buddha said that the most important aspect of what we do is the motivation why we do it. Yeah? And so instead of creating an identity and getting on our high horse because we're so superior, because we're against all those racists and bigots and whatever, to be humble. To be humble. And see, we are all in this mess of cyclic existence together, and one of us is not better than the other of us. We've got to help each other. That's the only way, is to help each other out of it. Okay?
Thank you again for coming. I really appreciate it and felt spiritually necessary for me to be here tonight, so thank you. So my question is, I think in relation to, and I would love to hear your thoughts, that I see and I've seen it in where I've worked in the past, and also I see it sort of formulate in society where there's perhaps an ideology where peace is not necessarily the outcome, and where there is a mechanism or idea that certain people believe that the game is to get more than other people, and that chaos is the objective, because then they constantly gain, and compassion and peace-seeking people, that tends to be in some ways exploited in order to achieve gain. And I struggle with it because I realize that when I'm engaged with people who are of that ideology or belief system, that I recognize that they're not necessarily looking for peace, they're looking for advantage. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on how you stay perhaps centered and, stay safe when, you're exposed to that, and potentially how do we overcome that to come to a point of collective peace?
So when some people think that their definition of happiness is money and power and so on, and when you're trying to live your life another way, it seems like those people can take advantage of you and squash you. And so what to do? First thing to do is don't buy into their philosophy. Okay? And that already is a big thing because we tend to be influenced by the people we're around. So to be able to hear all that stuff and stay very centered about what we believe and what we know in our hearts is true. Not just what we believe, but what we know and hear is true. And to our own ethical standards, to stay really firm and faithful to our own ethical standards. That's the first part. So not to buy into their thing. And we don't need to battle it. We just don't play along. We don't play along. Yeah? And we show that it's possible to be happy and balanced and have a good life without having power and wealth. Yeah? And we just live our life and do what we do, trying to be as compassionate as we can, also to those people. But we hold our own line. We don't cave in. We don't let ourselves be exploited, but we don't build up a wall either. Okay? It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but this experience in my family, with one family member that would like to kind of pick out my faults, yeah, put it mildly, pick out my faults and say this is wrong and that's wrong and everything. And of course, when I was younger, then I would get defensive and I would get angry and I would get hurt. And then when I got older, once in a while, if it didn't hurt anything, I would do what that person wanted, just because it didn't hurt anything. And it may have looked to other people that they were that they were doing a power trip over me, but they weren't, because I chose of my own free will to do that, because I thought it's a small thing, it makes them happy, why not? And then other times when that was still coming at me, then I would make it into a joke. And I would laugh, and I would agree with them. Yeah? Sometimes if somebody's bullying you, you turn around, you say, you know, you're absolutely right, I really am a dipwit. Then what are they going to say after that? Yeah, you're right, I am a klutz, I am a dimwit. I can't add 2 and 2. Then? Okay? So I don't think we need to build up walls, but we stay centered.
Thank you for joining us and for sharing your thoughts. I appreciated that you mentioned at the beginning of your talk white supremacy. And here at the Divinity School, a few weeks ago, they hosted a conference on Buddhism and race. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how we can, as individuals and in our own communities, in our sanghas, make diversity and inclusion a practice, something that's ongoing, and make sure that people of color, LGBTQ folks, low-income folks are included and feel that those are spaces where they're welcomed.
I think that comes from changing our own heart. Okay. I know some Buddhist organizations have special programs for LGBTQ people or people of color or whatever. At the Abbey, we don't have any special programs, and people of all kinds of orientations and backgrounds and countries and colors come to us. Yeah? I don't know why. Maybe because that's the way we are, just as human beings, and people can come and feel comfortable. What I'm getting at is sometimes we try and have special programs. We're going to have a special program to include people. And sometimes that's a good idea, and it works well, and sometimes it's too artificial. Because I think what really is important is when in our own hearts we are open-minded towards others, then other people feel that and they come, and we don't need to have a program. Are you getting what I'm saying? Yeah? So it's the meditation that I personally find very effective for that. It's one called equanimity, yeah, where we look at the people we call friends that we get attached to, the people we call enemies, which means just anybody we don't get along with or we feel threatened by, and that we have aversion to. And then the people that we put in the stranger category and we're apathetic towards them. And we tend to divide human beings up in these 3 categories. Yeah. And it's very easy to put minorities in the enemy category because they do things different than you do. But if you're doing this meditation and you're really looking closely at why am I attached to friends? Why do I have animosity towards enemies? And why am I apathetic towards strangers? When you really investigate this deeply, you come to see that that whole structure is conceptually created by our own mind. That there is no inherently existent friend, enemy, and stranger. Absolutely not. And when we really look at it, there's no reason to feel attached to some people and apathetic towards others and angry at a third group. There's no justifiable reason for that. Because the whole classification is made up by our own mind on the basis of how do people treat me? So I'm the center of the universe. People who treat me well, who agree with me, who are kind to me, they go in the friend category and I'm attached to them. People who disagree with me, who interfere with my happiness, they go in the enemy category and I can't stand them and I want to hurt them, or at least get away from them. People who don't affect me one way or the other, they're in the friend category, the stranger category. Why should I care about them? And to see that that whole discrimination is based on how people treat me. And what's behind that is I am the center of the universe. And how people treat me is the most important thing in the universe. And when you realize that that's what you're thinking, you have to sit back and go, that is nuts. You know, that is so unrealistic, crazy. Because everybody wants to be happy equally. Everybody wants to be free of suffering equally. All that other stuff about how people treat me and their political party and their sexual orientation and their race and their ethnicity and their gender and blah, blah, all that is superficial stuff that doesn't count for beans. And you see, you know, that your whole mind has been discriminating between people in a totally crazy, unrealistic way. And then you become very intent on dismantling that. Yeah? And as you dismantle it, then, you know, your heart is naturally much more open, and whoever shows up experiences that. Because you know how it is. When you when you meet a new person, you can tell if they don't feel comfortable. Yeah. I mean, like, I look a bit strange, don't you think? So, yeah, sometimes people meet me and it's like, you know, some lady with no hair. Yeah. And other people meet me and very different reaction. But that's all coming from their mind. Yeah, it doesn't really have anything to do with me. And so I try, whoever it is, to just be friendly and pleasant back. Yeah. So I could tell you some interesting stories. Yeah. Like, I go in the women's bathroom and then somebody comes in and goes, oh, because they think I'm a man. Yeah, because no hair. I fly a lot, you know? So I'm on the plane, and what would you like to drink, sir? Or I'm boarding a plane, and a woman comes up behind me and puts her hand on my shoulder and says, don't worry, dear, when the chemo's over, your hair will come back. Isn't that sweet? And somebody else, I'm sitting there minding my own business in the airport, came up to me, you know, walking really quickly towards me like they know me or something, and came up and said, it's Jesus. What am I supposed to do with that? So I smiled, you know. So, you know, so if you react in a friendly way, then a lot of that stuff can't continue. Okay, does that make some sense to you?
Yes, thank you. I guess just as a follow-up to that, are there things, though, that structurally within these communities, when I walk in and I don't see another face like myself, you know, there's not another teacher who I can relate to on maybe just from the same
Who do you think
background.
you are? Why are you so attached to what your face looks like?
Well, not even
There's
about my
plenty of
face.
Asian teachers. I'm the one who feels weird walking into a temple. But who cares whether people look like you? If you can look into somebody's heart and see that the most important thing to them is they want to be happy and they don't want to suffer, it doesn't matter whether they look like you or not.
Let me acknowledge that. Thank you. I definitely agree wholeheartedly with that, and I don't want to turn this at all into some sort of an intellectual exercise.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just curious because I've heard from folks, from friends who are people of color, and they show up at communities where, even if it's not needing to have necessarily the same skin color or gender or
Right, yeah.
et cetera, but something about the shared experience of having grown up a certain way
Yeah.
that enables you to access those teachings
Right.
in a more accessible way, or in a way in which you can connect at the heart level, as opposed to sometimes feeling that there might be some sort of microaggression, of folks not understanding them and just not feeling welcome in the space. I don't know if that makes sense. Just more from an emotional level.
I know completely what you're talking about, because I spent a lot of time living in Asia. Yeah, and I was the oddball. And I was the person who wasn't welcome. And I was a woman. Yeah, I mean, Buddhism, there's a nice, strong male patriarchy. Yeah, and then somebody like me comes along, and you're a nun. Nuns are they respect the lay women more than they respect the nuns, because the lay women can be benefactors. The nuns aren't. Yeah? So, you see, there's bias, there's prejudice, there's patriarchy, and there's this incredible beauty in the teachings. And sometimes my teachers, because I was the first generation that kind of was interested in Tibetan Buddhism, and they would teach us right from the Tibetan scriptures. And so they have all these Tibetan kind of stories, stories that make sense in their culture, that mean something to them. And our teachers would teach us and tell the story, and they would be laughing, and we'd all be sitting there, the Westerners, like, what's so funny? We just wouldn't get the story. And yet they thought the story was hilarious. So, believe me, I know what it's like. But if you want to learn, you go through difficulties. Okay? Now, that's no excuse for groups becoming very tight with an a mentality of being exclusive. I mean, you can tell sometimes you go into some groups and it's like, well, we belong to this tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And, yeah, I don't agree with that. I'm not trying to justify that. But I'm talking about from the viewpoint of the person, of when we feel we don't belong, how to break that down. And then, of course, if we see other people can come into our environment and feel they don't belong, how about going up and talking to them? Yeah? It's very simple. You go up and talk. Hi. You're new at the temple, you're new at the Dharma Center. Hi, my name is so-and-so. Come sit next to me when we do the chanting. I'll help you and show you what prayers we're on. I'll help you learn the etiquette, and, what's your name and where did you live and what's your interest in Buddhism? How about that? Just being a friendly human being and helping someone out who's new. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying. And I think it's a two-way thing, because I think, the groups who have an exclusivity, mentality, that's not good. People need to open up. But also, sometimes we can be so ego-sensitive to do I belong, do I not belong, that we miss the opportunity. Yeah. Okay, let me tell you one other story. I was leading a retreat in Washington State. This was some years ago. And one African-American woman who came to the group quite often, she was at the retreat. And I think she was the only African-American one there. And the retreat was like, I don't know, a week and a half long or something. And so sometime later after that, because we were friends, I said to her, you know, kind of, or somehow the topic came up about her being the only black person there. And she said, you know, that was one of the first times where I was invisible to myself. Meaning that she felt completely relaxed in that group because she didn't see herself as black in contrast to white. Yeah. And so, you know, whatever group, because all of us can find a way in which we don't belong. Can you think of some quality that you have that makes you not belong in a group? Yeah, all of us. It could be any kind of thing, you know, social class, education, athletic ability, yeah, music ability. We can distance ourselves from others based on anything our little mind desires. Or we could practice looking into others' hearts. Yeah, and to realize that some people, the way they think, they feel like they don't belong, and then reaching out and being kind and being friendly. Okay, so I'm not trying to poo-poo your question. Yeah, but I don't know. When people have special programs for minority groups, when a Buddhist, I know one Buddhist center does that, they'll have a special retreat for, you know, people of color. And I can recognize that some people of color may feel really good about going there and because of a shared cultural experience, being able to share the Dharma and talk about being people of color together. But I would also like them to feel that comfort telling me about their experience and me being able to tell them about my experience. Because I grew up in a minority. Yeah. And gee, it'd be really interesting to hear other people's experience of being a minority in white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male society. Yeah? Okay.
Thank you for coming. This is for the first time for me to attend or hear Buddhist teaching. I'm Christian, so it was very, very interesting, and a lot of things were very helpful. I don't want to go to the God's will and how that contradicts human responsibility because it's very complicated, but I have a different question than this one. You mentioned something about being in a cave and being in a relationship with every living being. I'm just confused, like, what does relationship mean and what is the concept of relationship in Buddhism in that sense?
That's a good question. So what I meant in saying that is we live in an interconnected world and we're completely dependent on other living beings. Yeah. I mean, if you look, especially look at the global economy. Yeah. Do you know any of the people who made the clothes or the cloth or the thread of the clothes you're wearing? But how many people were involved in making those clothes and shipping them and packaging them and inventing the what is it? Well, not just, it could be harvesting the cotton, or it could be the polyesters. You know, who invented those? Who works in the factory that makes polyester? All of this. We're so connected with other living beings, but we don't realize it. Yeah, we feel like we're isolated individuals, but we really are so interconnected. And when you open your heart to that, then you really see, you know, you feel that interconnection with other people. Okay? And you see that you can't be doing what you're doing if other people didn't exist. Well, for me, relationship doesn't mean we have to meet. Okay? To me, relationship is the feeling in my heart of being related to other people, so that if and when I do meet them, I feel a connection. Yeah? That's what I'm talking about, you know? Okay? Yeah.
You mentioned in your talk 2 extremes. One of the extremes was trying to be like a Mother Teresa or a Martin Luther King, or you know, constantly doing this social activity to benefit others. And the other extreme was living in a cave somewhere and working on your mind and working on your own Dharma practice and so on. I find myself struggling with a third extreme, that of feeling like I have done enough for the people around me. I work hard for my family, for my community, and so on, but I have all this time that I spend in leisure activities that are not really devoted to helping others or helping myself, that are just kind of selfish activities and a waste of my time that I would like to stop doing, but I don't know how to do that.
Okay. So, yeah, I think we all face this because we can all see intellectually how we could be practicing better. And we all aren't at the point of being able to do that. And so there has to be a certain amount of self-acceptance of, yeah, I can see that I could be doing more and I want to do more, but I need to rest and I need some playtime and I need a little bit of distraction. So I don't really need it. That's my crazy berserky mind that's craving it. But okay, I take a little bit of that and then I slowly kind of nudge myself in to go in the direction I want to go in. Yeah, it's the slow nudge. I think that works better. We can't just say, okay, from now on I'm cutting out all distraction. Yeah, and then we kind of become like born-again Buddhists. We become so rigid. Yeah. Yeah, have you ever met born-again vegetarians? I'm a vegetarian, but I don't like being around born-again vegetarians. They're too much for me. Okay? So it's the same way, you know? It's like we know the direction we want to go into. Keep that in mind and just do what we can, slowly going there. Yeah? But keep going there. Okay?
Yeah, I want to say that I really appreciate your comments on the kind of the individual level about the power of an individual smile, or when we have that individual feeling of not belonging or being different, kind of how to deal with those challenges. I'm wondering if you could speak more to kind of the systems level or structural, when we look at the chaos in our world and how it's connected to structural oppression. So my question is around, like the question that was raised before, how that is connected to living in a society that systematically oppresses certain people and doesn't just see all people as individuals.
Whenever there's an opportunity to stand up and say that behavior's not correct, you stand up and do it.
So in terms of, sorry, maybe I didn't phrase it clearly, in terms of creating change in institutions, like in
Yeah.
Sangha or academic institutions, when forces like white supremacy systematically marginalize certain people or heterosexism or any of these other forces, yeah, in terms of how we can be accountable to create change and not just say we're all the same, and as that relates to kind of spiritual bypassing of saying like we're all
Yeah.
people. So
Then there's two ways. Then you can either join the institution and change it from inside, or stay out of the institution and point out things to them from being an outlier. Those are the two views that I see, and then we need both of them. Yeah.
thank you.
I mean, people ask this question a lot. I'm a little bit puzzled sometimes what they think I could possibly say. Yeah, like, okay, you get everybody in the organization together and you say, from now on, none of us are going to be racist. And everybody says, you're absolutely right, we shouldn't be racist. And then the organization continues to be racist. Because that's not how things change. That's what I meant by you can't you need legislation to get rid of the obvious discrimination, and you need enforcement of the legislation. And you need people on the outside saying, look, we're not enforcing it, and we need new legislation. And we need to change our own minds and work on an individual level. I can't, if anybody here, I would really like to hear other people's ideas, because I can't think of other ideas besides those. There's no magic wand to wave to get rid of systemic racism or systemic homophobia or whatever it is.
Sure. As just a comment of, I'm an openly gay woman, and just sort of met the challenges of also growing up in Scotland, where it was a very homogenistic society. And I've got a mother who was, a few many generations back, was part Indian. And so sort of facing being different. And so this is something that has just been about survival for me, but also has then become a sense of recognizing and understanding it, just based on being sensitive to it, not just for myself, but for other people. Like if seeing somebody who's on their own and being isolated, I would go and speak to that person because I would know how that would feel for me. But I feel that the one, observation I have, and this is just truly an observation, is just when people connect from the heart, in the sense of, if you just take the example of what happened in around the gay vote, gay marriage in Southern Ireland, where it's the most, Catholic environment on the planet, where there are more people who practice Catholic religion per capita there than anywhere else. And the church came out very strongly against the vote, but yet people voted for gay marriage, and that didn't even happen here. It was legislated here, it wasn't by popular vote. And what happened there is that people for years saw the church, in essence, chase their sons and daughters to London and never see their children again. Yeah. And so there was a heartfelt sense of family and emotional connection on a very tangible level that just was like a mesh that connected on so many ways that just became the impetus of change. And I think that, when I've seen these things happen, or even just the gun violence that we've seen, that there's an emotional, heartfelt, personal connection as opposed to ideological. And then it seems to then have this just effect where it just like almost like a positive contagion where people recognize it and connect. And so I don't know if that's an answer, but it's something that I've been seeing as something that's generated a very rapid and positive outcome.